Jim Fox was astounded by how quickly things could change. He awoke that morning feeling awful. He'd slept fitfully the night before, unsure how to tell his daughter Emily that he'd seen her boyfriend with one of her so-called girlfriends in the mall. This alone would not be an issue. But these two were really making out outside the mall. Jim was quite sure he knew his daughter well enough to realize that this knowledge would make her very upset. Jim never hesitated to tell Emily exactly what he observed. He was merely concerned about how and when to inform her. Her volleyball team was due to play in a district semifinal match in a few hours, and she needed to stay focused to perform well. Jim planned to break the terrible news to her on the way home after the match. Jim then reflected on his discussion with his supervisor that afternoon. He was summoned to an office and introduced to an elderly lumbering guy named Ralph Jenkins. Jim shook his boss's hand and kept his mouth shut as he waited to be addressed. "Jim, we recently concluded negotiating the purchase of precise buffers in Daytona Beach," his boss announced. "You've just met Ralph, the previous owner. We're commencing work at the beginning of the year, and I'd like you to oversee our maintenance team. I understand you were dissatisfied with your opportunity to advance here, but we just promoted you. You will be working with Ralph from Thanksgiving to the end of the year. He'll introduce you to everyone and catch you up. You're intimately familiar with our equipment. As a result, you'll find this easy. I have just one question. Are you ready to relocate to Daytona Beach? The factory sale included a 2-bedroom flat owned by Ralph's company. You can relocate your family instantly and stay there for the next year without paying rent. By then, you should be able to determine whether this is the appropriate fit for you or whether you want to buy your own property in Dayton. Before you respond, I must state that this position will result in a 25% wage boost. How long will it take to think things through? Agree? Jim responded promptly. My wife complained about the winters in Pennsylvania. Her greatest concern was that I would be transferred to a plant in Michigan. She'll be happy when I suggest the pay bump and Daytona Beach. She can easily relocate her workload to the nearest Home Depot. I will gladly accept this position. Then everything is decided. Why don't you use my business car to drive Ralph back to the airport, then take the rest of the day off? The boss proposed. Jim grinned to himself as he dropped Ralph off and drove away from the airport terminal. Suddenly, everything began to look good. Emily might relocate to Daytona for her final semester of high school and forget about her loser boyfriend. Finally, everything went as planned. But then, no. Helen, Jim's wife, drove a crimson Camry, as did 10 million others, except that a driver's license-holding child backed into the front of her car when she was parked at work last week. He bent the front grille fairly badly. The majority of the plastic had simply fallen off, but a few pieces of bent metal remained. The radiator was now clearly visible. As Jim drove by, he observed a red Camry with a radiator parked in front of the Best Western Motel, just a few blocks from the airport. With his heart racing, Jim turned to the far end of the parking lot. He parked in an empty space next to the Camry. He evaluated the situation. He was a non-violent individual, but if Helen didn't have a good enough reason for parking her automobile at the motel, she was in big danger. Jim gradually calmed down, realizing he was driving a company automobile that his wife had never seen. The windows were tinted, possibly more than was permissible in the state. He decided to wait till Helen got out of her car and see who was with her. After a few minutes, he understood that simply sitting there wasn't enough. So he devised a simple idea. Helen's spare tire was still in the garage where he had left it after repairing it a few days earlier. He knew Helen would contact him to come get the spare tire if she had a flat, with a furtive look about. Jim slid out of the car, opened his jackknife, and cut the valve stem on Helen's spare tire, which was situated on the left rear. When he got into the back seat of the corporate car, the tire was already flat. Then he slouched in his seat and waited very impatiently. Half an hour later, he heard a profanity at his car window, which he lowered by half an inch. "Damn it, what do I do now? No problem, sexy lady. After a meal like the one we just had, I'll be pleased to assist you." The man responded as Jim's life crumbled around him. "I do not have a spare tire. My husband did not reinstall the wheel in the automobile after he repaired it. Helen complained because it was in her garage at home. What a worthless moron." Helen's lover grinned. "I always ensure that my wife's car is in top shape. I do not want her stuck with the kids. I now regret not going on my own, but instead accompanying you. What do we do? Let's return to our room and warm up while I call, Helen offered as the love couple returned to the motel. Jim waited for the telephone to ring. He considered how he would question Helen if she called, especially since she instructed him to transport the tire to the Don't Tell motel near the airport. The only issue with this plan was that his phone did not ring. 20 minutes later, a familiar Honda Civic drove into the parking lot and parked on the opposite side. Jim assumed he would never grow worse, but he was mistaken. His daughter Emily was offering assistance to her deceitful mother. Emily knocked on the motel door and waited a full minute until it opened. Jim couldn't understand what Emily was saying, but she turned and walked to her car, opening the trunk. She picked up the wheel and set it on the sidewalk as Helen and her boyfriend approached Frank. "Buy this for Emily. She has to play tonight and cannot be hurt or exhausted before the match begins." Helen was worried. "Thanks for your care, Mom. If you were thinking about me, you could have gotten dressed before I arrived. I need to rush to school and prepare for the match. Can you take it from here?" Emily inquired, clearly upset. "No problem," Em said. Jim had come to know Frank. "As soon as I get in the car, your mother will drop me off at Home Depot where my vehicle is parked. I will have time to watch you play tonight. I will be pulling for you. Thanks, Frank. Please do not sit too near to Mom. Dad will be present and I do not want any drama when I am playing. Do not worry. I will not damage your father." Frank laughed. "I doubt he'll ever understand what's going on. Even if he did, he wouldn't question me. He knows it won't help him." "Frank, I asked you not to talk about Jim in that way. He's my husband and Emily's father. He's a wonderful individual who deserves respect." Jim's beloved wife replied. Emily looked at her mom. "Respect? In what world would your acts be judged? Respect for him? I just want to finish school before getting divorced. I told you I loved your father, and there will be no divorce. We'll die in each other's arms," Helen insisted. "I'm afraid you're a little crazy. Dad will not allow you having boyfriends, and eventually he'll catch you with one. Just one. And Frank is not the person. We're just buddies with benefits." Helen said, "We probably won't be able to keep this up for long, so we're enjoying it while we can. I deserve some fun, after putting so much time and effort into our marriage." Dad put in the same amount of time, if not more effort. Emily remarked that he had a girlfriend. "Your father? Hardly." Helen laughed. "He is not one of those. You know how shy he is around ladies? It took him weeks to gather the nerve to ask me out. In contrast to that guy, he is a father, a good spouse and father." Emily nodded toward Frank, who was attempting to lift Helen's automobile. "Frank is a good person. He is witty, attentive, a good father, and an excellent provider. He is cheating on his wife. You mentioned that Dad is a good husband because he is faithful. Frank, however, is not. If he had considered his wife and children, he would not have entertained a married woman at a rundown motel." Emily was indignant. It was nasty and inappropriate. Helen snapped. "I am not in the mood to dispute with you about this. You need to get to school and prepare. Frank and I will be there shortly. We'll root for you." "For whatever reason, I don't feel as warm and cozy," Emily countered. "Keep him away from Dad. Frank doesn't believe it, but Dad can kick his ass." Emily got in her Honda and drove away, leaving Helen and Frank alone while he tightened the knots on the wheel. "She's not really happy for us, is she? I believe my daughter would feel the same way if she knew. That is why I do not do anything to warn her or my wife. I told you, I didn't realize she was there the day I brought you home. She should have been in school. She understands what happens. She's keeping it a secret. It will end our marriage. And she does not want that," Helen reassured. Jim sat disoriented in the back seat of the business car long after Helen had driven away. Learning that Helen was cheating on him was extremely unpleasant. When he finally woke up, he was devastated to learn that his daughter was aware of the situation and accepted it. Jim realized that his daughter's volleyball match would begin throughout her high school career. He never missed one. This must change. Jim returned to the parking lot, picked up his truck, and headed home. He had no appetite and no desire to see his wife and kid at the kitchen table. He had a few beers and attempted to plan for his future. He had to realize the absurdity of feeling on top of the world one minute, and then everything going wrong the next. He suspected Helen might not want to go to Dayton now that she had a lover. The more he reflected about it, the more unpleasant the whole scenario seemed. He was always faithful and worked hard to support his family. He did not deserve what Helen did to him. He always assumed that she appreciated their love. He therefore concluded that Helen had been abnormally amorous since Labor Day. She knew that if she kept him in a good bed, he'd be as content as a pig and never suspect anything. Unfortunately, it functioned perfectly. Jim assumed Helen was unaware that his company was buying a factory in Florida. If he had told her that his firm was relocating him, she would have believed it was to Michigan. She would never consider moving there, especially over Thanksgiving. He could go into an apartment in Florida and have time to cope with his family issues without Helen mentioning him. She could have sex with Frank every single day. He and Emily will remain in Pennsylvania while he enjoys the sunshine and surf of Florida. The more he considered it, the more he loved it. It wasn't much of a revenge, but it was a start. He had the weekend and the coming week to plan the move. He'll travel to Dayton shortly after Thanksgiving. His devoted wife and daughter would assume he was heading to Michigan, so they would not even invite him to join them. Jim felt a little better knowing he had a strategy to avoid seeing Helen and Emily anytime soon. He grabbed Dramamines and sat them down with another beer. He had learned from experience that it would take a bomb to wake him up before daylight. He walked to the master bedroom and got the clothes he'd need the next morning, then took them to the spare bedroom. He brought amenities and a razor to the second bathroom. He then shut the door to the guest room and got into bed. He worried for almost 10 minutes before falling asleep. He's at home. Emily noticed her father's pickup truck sitting in the garage. I'm curious why he didn't come to school to clap for me. I hope he isn't sick. Helen stepped ahead of Emily into the kitchen and noticed the empty beer cans on the table, implying that he had consumed the most of the 6-pack. This does not sound like Jim. I hope he is okay. I will go check on him. Helen was surprised to not find Jim in bed. She returned to the kitchen to converse with Emily. He is not in bed, he wasn't inside the garage, and he's not watching television. Where do you believe he is? There are simply a few choices, Emily answered. We can peek around the basement and laundry room. I don't think Dad knows where that is. Then my room and the guest bedroom. Finally, the two women discovered Jim asleep in the guest room. Their attempts to wake him failed since he continued to breathe heavily while gripping his pillow. I believe he has been drinking, Emily proposed. I've never seen him drink excessively before, but he certainly acts like it. I'm wondering why he missed my match and why he drinks. Let us ask him in the morning. Helen reacted by closing the bedroom door. He may not be feeling well. He sometimes sleeps here to prevent passing on the bug he has. He'll feel terrible in the morning, so don't make him feel any worse for not showing up tonight. Frank believes you play quite well, Helen added. He believes you can earn a scholarship. Why is that so difficult for you to understand? I do not care what Frank thinks, Emily asked irritably. In my opinion, he is a cheating jackass. And if I never see him again, it will be too soon. You should not think like that, Helen complained. Why can't you simply be happy for me? I like him. He makes me feel youthful and appealing. It's probably because I can't stop worrying about my father. I don't think it will be healthy for him to learn about Frank. It'll break his heart. That is why he cannot find out. I offer him as much love as he wants, so there's nothing to lose. Frank just gets more than your father can bear. Keep telling yourself this, Mom. I seriously doubt Dad would think of it that way, and if you keep the same spirit, he'll find out. But not from me, Emily stated emphatically. If you don't tell him, he won't suspect anything. I know your father. He absolutely trusts me. Helen replied as Emily turned and entered her bedroom. Jim's eyes opened at 5 a.m., and he was awake. He discreetly dressed and exited the house. He had just finished his meal at IHOP when his cell phone rang. Jim, are you all right? Helen inquired worriedly. You didn't attend Emily's match last night. I slept in the guest room and left home early Saturday morning. This does not sound like you. I get it. I simply determined to be more unpredictable and act on the spur of the moment, Jim replied before hanging up and shutting off the phone. Jim spent the entire morning at the facility, ensuring that all of his tools and belongings were loaded into the pickup truck. He'll need them in his new place as time passes. Jim found himself more capable of dealing with his predicament. He recognized that while he couldn't undo the past, he could do everything he could to have a good future. He will work in a new location, meet new people, and enjoy the nicer weather. He was resolved to make the circumstance benefit him. Jim also knew that he needed to keep his relocation to Florida a secret for the next 3 days. Thursday was Thanksgiving Day. By then, he'll be completely packed and ready to depart early in the morning. Helen and Emily will believe he is traveling to an even colder climate. He was resolved not to say anything that might give them reason to believe otherwise. It was late afternoon when Jim entered his house while washing his hands in the restroom. Helen glared at him. "Never hang up!" Helen shouted. "You missed Emily's major match, which they won. If you want to get drunk and pass out in the guest room, sneak out early to avoid me and hang up when I call out of concern. I presume you're expecting me to prepare dinner right now. In my opinion, you could die from starvation." 2 days ago, Jim would have felt bad and apologized to Helen. He recognized that her rage had no meaning for him. What difference does it make to him whether she is happy or not? He simply nodded before walking out the door. 10 minutes later, he was ordering ribs at a nearby sports pub. Jim was shocked that he could still enjoy life. He sipped a couple drinks and discussed sports with the other patrons. He arrived home around 11 p.m. Helen and Emily were seated in the living room watching an old film. "So you've decided to grace us with your presence?" Helen asked cynically. "Don't expect to sleep in my bed until you apologize to Emily and me for acting like an idiot." "Okay." That was all Jim muttered as he walked past the living room and into the bedroom. He hastily gathered his clothing for tomorrow and carried them to the guest room, where he swiftly undressed and slipped into bed. "He didn't seem concerned that you were so unhappy." Emily noticed. When Jim was out of sight, he acts as if he enjoys sleeping in the guest room. "You do not know your father?" Helen grinned. "He won't last more than 2 nights before climbing back into bed with me. He knows when he's feeling good." "Probably," Emily said skeptically. "I just hope he doesn't realize how good Frank is." "Please cease discussing his name," Helen insisted. "I desire to keep this a secret, so please stop discussing him." "I guess you prefer to be the one who raises him." Emily responded, "If he's not ready for his wife." Helen looked at her daughter, hoping she would be embarrassed to talk to her own mother like that. When Emily first saw her with Frank, Helen felt it would make things easier. There would be one fewer person to lie to, and Emily was far more aware of her mother's actions than Jim. Emily agreed to keep Frank a secret, primarily because she did not want her parents to split, but she grew more disrespectful. Helen found it challenging to be both a good mother and a good lover because her daughter was aware she was playing both roles. Then there was Jim's difficulty. What had gotten into him in the previous 2 days? She did not recall the tiniest quarrel or scorn. He was simply being terrible, and she was not going to stand for it. He'll come to his senses. The sex she had with him was too amazing for him to miss for long. She was certain of it. Jim woke up early again on Sunday morning. He ate breakfast at IHOP again before taking a lengthy walk in the park. It was a cool and calm November morning. He appreciated the fresh air on his face, particularly since he knew he wouldn't have to deal with the cold after he relocated to Florida. He returned home shortly before noon carrying a 6-pack of beer. He turned on the television, opened a bottle of beer, and began watching all of the pregame coverage, while waiting for the Eagles game to begin airing. Helen chose to ignore him for the first hour, then stomped into the garage and drove away. Helen arrived home around 6:30, and the second batch finished shortly after 7. When Jim noticed that there was no sign of dinner, he turned off the television and fled. He returned to a neighborhood sports pub 20 minutes later to eat ribs and watch football. The Eagles had defeated the Giants, and he spent much of the evening happy. They played Cowboys on Thanksgiving Day, and Jim couldn't wait for them to annihilate the crying girls. "Dad has been acting peculiar recently, don't you think?" Emily inquired as she and her mother sat in the living room. "He normally watches the game on Sunday. Did you two have a fight?" "We almost didn't speak," the mother responded. "I told him that he needed to apologize for missing your match and drinking too much before he could return to my bed. Before this, I told him that I would not cook for him unless his attitude changed. Soon he'll miss my cooking and love. He will apologize soon." Emily and Helen were enjoying a movie when Jim arrived home. By halftime, the football game had turned very one-sided, so he exited the bar. He moved past his wife and children to the second bedroom. Jim closed the door, removed his underwear, and crawled under the bed. Helen had tension during the next 3 days. Jim remained mute, implying he had no intention of apologizing. She had never seen him act so defiantly toward her, and it made her uncomfortable. To top things off, when she met Frank on Tuesday afternoon, she had another flat tire at the motel. She concluded that the two flat tires were not a coincidence and resolved never to stay at the motel again. Fortunately, she took the time and trouble to have the spare tire repaired on Monday, and Frank replaced it for her again. Jim spent Monday packing the clothes he planned to take with him. On Tuesday morning, he collected all of his personal items and tools and loaded them onto the truck. He arranged the remaining garments in the closet so that it appeared full. I'm wondering if Helen will notice that he didn't bring cold weather gear on Monday and Tuesday afternoons. Jim drove to Home Depot and waited for his wife to depart. On Monday, she departed at her regular hour and went to a neighboring food store to shop. He watched her until he knew she was on her way home, then parked into the parking lot of his new favorite bar for dinner and a Monday night football game. "Is Dad not going to come home today?" Emily inquired, seating down at the table next to her mother. "Who knows? He is not speaking to me and he is still sleeping in the guest room." Helen said, "I'm not sure what came over him." "Is it possible that he found out what happened to you?" Emily asked. "You told him he couldn't sleep with you and that you would not cook for him, so why would he come home? Perhaps you should simply forgive him and prepare him a wonderful meal tomorrow night." "I cannot. I'm meeting Frank tomorrow. You will have to eat leftovers. I'll return home a bit later." "So much forgiving, Frank. Just what?" "Dad cannot manage her." "Mom, you skip dinner, disregard your father as if he were useless, and rush to satisfy Frank. Frank appears to have the upper hand in this negotiation. At the very least, Frank isn't acting like an ass. Helen insisted that he treat me with respect, doesn't get drunk or hang up. Perhaps he regularly shares your bed. He's a good person," Emily asked. "Does he take out the garbage, maintain the grass, paint the house, or pay our mortgage?" "Of course not." "What do you mean?" Helen asked. "Frank does not have to do anything but get into bed with you." Emily responded, "Dad does all of this plus much more. Frank has sex with you, and you think he's the best guy for it. You do not expect him to help around the house. He's not required to join you to social gatherings or sit in a hospital waiting room while your leg is set after falling down the stairs. You have high expectations of your father and withhold what you should gladly offer him, instead giving it to Frank. And he has done nothing to deserve it other than comment on how attractive you are. Your behavior is unacceptable," Helen snapped. "I'm your mother, and I hope you'll show me some respect. And Dad expects you to respect him and be loyal to him, but this does not happen." Emily opposed strongly. Respect can be gained rather than demanded on that particular evening. Emily halted her father as he moved through the living room to the stairs. "Our district championship game is tomorrow in the state gym. We are playing at 4. Do you believe you can do it? I will examine my schedule to see what I can accomplish," Jim responded invasively before proceeding up the steps. Emily whined, "I think he's angry with me too. I haven't done anything to make him furious, but he doesn't seem to care what I have to say. I'm telling you, he's in a strange mood." Helen comforted her that he is dissatisfied about something, but lacks the verbal abilities to express it. "He'll attend the game tomorrow. Look, his truck is in the garage." Emily sobbed the following evening. "He may attend my match, he simply didn't want to. Why is he upset at me?" "That is a perfectly sensible question," Helen agreed sadly while listening to her daughter wail. "Let's find out what is going on right now." Once again, they discovered an empty six-pack on the kitchen counter, and Jim was nowhere to be seen. "It's only 8 o'clock now." Helen expressed concern that he couldn't possibly be in bed already. Once again, they were unable to awaken Jim from his deep sleep in the guest room. Defeated, both women retreated to the living room. "Tomorrow is Thanksgiving Day. Will you let Dad eat with us?" "Yes, of course. His parents will arrive, as will mine. This is his residence. I'll never try to keep him back, and he knows it. Hopefully, he'll be better behaved by then. I invited the group to arrive about 4. Who have you invited? Mom? Please tell me it isn't Frank. Frank and his wife will come shortly. I believe he and Jim will get along well. They both enjoy football and hunting. They have much in common." Helen reasoned, "The problem is that one of the things they share is you." Emily mentioned that spouses normally don't want to share this with their hunting mates or football fans. "You are displaying traditional signals of guilt and unconsciously desire to be caught. This is a very awful concept. I just think they'll get along fantastically. Jim needs more pals. Frank will help him. You really have lost your mind. There's no way those two in the same room could be any good, Emily insisted. We will see, Helen responded. I believe a surprise awaiting you. Jim woke up early on Thanksgiving morning. He drove to a tiny cafe open until noon and ate a leisurely breakfast. He returned to the residence about 9 a.m. His senses were assailed by the aromas of turkey, potatoes, gravy, pie, and a variety of other cooked items. We'll sit down at the table at noon, Helen announced. Our folks will arrive shortly before that. Do you want something to drink? Jim shook his head, entered the living room, sat down, and switched on the television. He knew Helen was attempting to extend an olive branch, but he was no longer interested in what she had to say. He greeted her parents pleasantly when they arrived. They were polite and always treated Jim well. A few minutes later, his parents came. I have an announcement to make. Jim made the announcement while the family handed food around the table. I am being transferred to another plan within the firm. I am leaving tomorrow a.m. The effort will last at least until spring, possibly longer. Helen was stunned. Why didn't he mention it earlier? She could never go that quickly. And if so, would she accept to relocate to Michigan? Perhaps this was why Jim had been acting strangely during the last week. He knew Helen would never agree to quit her work and freeze her ass off. This is quite unexpected, Helen's mother commented. Helen never mentioned it. Will she join you, or will you wait to see how serious it is? I'll go alone, Jim responded. It would be unfair to expect Emily to change schools and Helen to leave her job. I will just have to suffer alone for a few months. Both sets of grandparents began talking about the weather in Michigan and how cold it would be, and Helen and Emily exchanged glances. They were thinking the same thing. Jim is upset about leaving his family and venturing into the icy wasteland. No wonder he was in a terrible mood. After supper, Jim, his father, and Helen's father sat in front of the television to watch the second half of the Eagles game. The Cowboys had a 17 lead at the half, and things only got worse from there. All three were disgusted by the lack of effort from their favorite team. They were watching the pre-game show of the second football game when the doorbell rang. Jim didn't pay much attention to her until Helen cleared her throat in the hallway. Hello, everyone. I'd like to introduce you to a couple of friends. This is Nancy and her husband, Frank. She then named each person in the room. Jim was the last one when Frank approached him. Jim was already on his feet. Frank grinned like a Cheshire cat. He was wearing a Dallas Cowboy sweater with Romo in big letters on the back. His smile grew even wider as he walked up to Jim and extended his hand. Hello, Jimmy. I've heard a lot about you. Jim masterfully kept everything to himself, but this was too much. Frank showed as much disrespect as he could, especially since he was at Jim's house. He laughed at Jim, at his favorite football team, but mostly at his inability to keep his wife. Jim suddenly reached his limit without any warning. Jim kicked Frank between the legs hard enough to knock him off his feet as he leaned down to grab his throbbing groin. Jim's knee met Frank's face with a sickening sound. Frank fell to the floor in the classic fetal position, blood gushing from his broken nose for several seconds. No one moved. Then Nancy screamed and fell next to her husband. Helen rushed to the bathroom and vomited into the toilet while Emily collected ice and a washcloth. She handed it to Nancy, who gently pressed it to Frank's face. Jim, like everyone else, was stunned by his actions, not knowing what else to do and feeling the disapproval of the others. He grabbed his coat and walked out the door. Jim didn't stop for the night until he got off Highway 81 and drove for a while on Highway 77 in Virginia. He rented a room in Healesville and fell asleep within minutes. When he woke up in the morning, he turned on the phone again. The mailbox was full, which didn't surprise him. He listened to several messages before deciding to delete them all. His mother, Helen, and Emily all called, demanding to know where he was and what he thought he was doing. Jim decided to stick to his schedule and drove the car south on Highway 77. As he drove, he kept replaying the events of the previous day in his head. That idiot Frank asked for it. But what will be the consequences? Will the highway patrol stop him and arrest him? Was he going to lose his job before he even got to Dayton? Would Helen divorce him now? He realized that he had to listen to his messages to understand the situation. He decided to leave the phone on but not answer it. He will check the messages once the caller hangs up. His cell phone rang after less than 30 minutes. He verified the ID and realized it was Helen. He waited a few minutes, then checked his texts. "Jim, call me. I understand that the transfer has disturbed you immensely, but you must pull yourself together. Frank will be all right, but his nose requires surgery. He refuses to press charges. Please give me a call." Jim rode the entire morning and afternoon. He arrived at the flat at 5 p.m. As promised, there was a safe connected to the outdoor faucet. He received the code by email a few days ago. He was able to open the box, retrieve the front door key, and enter. When he unpacked his clothes and personal items, it was well after 7 o'clock. He parked the truck in the garage, made his bed, and went to sleep. He had 2 days off before starting work, as it was Friday evening. During the relocation, he observed a few small issues with the apartment, so he decided Saturday would be a good day to improve its condition. Jim became concerned that Helen would phone him at work, find out about the day and plant, and then decide to join him. This was the last thing he wanted, so he decided to call her on Saturday morning. "Hello? Hi, Helen, this is Jim. Where in the hell are you? We called you throughout the night." The phone was switched off. "What exactly is wrong with you?" Frank sustained a cracked nose and a minor concussion. "All because he is rooting for a different football team. Are you a crazy person? When is it going to be?" Jim hit the end button, turned off his phone, and started writing a list of everything he would need at the neighborhood store. He returned to the flat an hour later, carrying a front door lock, an air conditioner filter, cleaning materials, and a 30-pack of beer. At midday, he called Emily on her cell phone. "Hi, Dad. I'm delighted you phoned. After you finished decorating Frank, an ambulance arrived and dragged him to the hospital. Both sets of grandparents were scared you were going insane. Mom was terrified they would sue us. I had to wipe the blood off the floor while Mom drove Nancy to the hospital. I believe she apologized to her 100 times. Aside from that." "Did anything interesting occur?" I asked Jim. "No, it was rather quiet. Emily added one more thing. Mom is unhappy because you hung up on me yet again. She was only warming up when you passed out." "Yes, I could tell," Jim admitted. "That was why I called you this time. I acquired a new job and will start working on Monday a.m., in case someone asks where I am. As an example, consider the police. Don't stress over it." Emily smirked. "Frank has not filed any charges despite the fact that I believe his wife wanted him to. The cops will not search for you. So why the secrecy around your translation? So that's why you've been acting strangely the last week or so. The day I learned about the transfer was really meaningful for me. I started reflecting on where I was in my life and where I needed to go. One of the consequences is that I will not be respected unless I respect myself." Jim answered thoughtfully. "I've gotten a little lost over the years, but I'm getting back on course. Are you okay, Dad? Is everything all right with your health? Do you have any difficulties we should be aware of?" Emily inquired concernedly. "Not exactly. You and your mother are both aware of my issues. I am confident of it," Jim replied regretfully. "Just tell your mother I'm fine and don't worry about me, if it's at all possible." "Okay, Dad. I shall contact you from time to time." "Will you take my calls?" Emily inquired. Jim found it incredibly difficult to control his rage at his daughter. He loved her unconditionally, but her disregard for him was difficult to tolerate. He knew he didn't want her out of his life entirely. He had already calmed down from his initial outrage when he discovered that his wife and daughter had conspired to deceive him in the worst way conceivable. "If you don't call while I'm working, I'll answer them," Jim responded after a brief hesitate. "How about Mom? Can she give you a call?" Emily was insistent. "Will you answer her calls now? If she wants to phone me and tell me what a jerk I am, she should spare herself the trouble," Jim quickly protested. "If there's an issue with the house or family that I should be aware of, she should call. Isn't it fair? That's how it should be, right?" "I'll tell her. Good luck with your new career and keep warm. Is it really freezing out there now?" Jim said, "It's better than I could have hoped." "Do not worry about the weather. I'll be all right here. Goodbye." Helen immediately started asking questions once Emily placed the phone in her lap. "What did he say?" "He apologized." "Is he frightened to go home? What exactly did he say about me? He appears to be unafraid of anything. He stated that no one would respect him unless I respected myself. That's why he let Frank down and keeps hanging up. If you ever wish to speak with him, it appears that you will need to be more respectful and considerate." Emily finished respectfully. He was the one who beat up a guest in our home simply because he was wearing the wrong t-shirt. He's the one that consistently hangs up. I'm going to tell him everything. I'm thinking about the next time I chat to. Helen made a vow. That is exactly what he was discussing. He refuses to listen. He'll simply hang up. Frank is the only person who will benefit from you unless you find another boyfriend or two. Why do you keep making such rude, disparaging remarks? Helen inquired. Emily responded, mostly because you are rude, demeaning, and extremely disrespectful. Frank beamed wildly at Dad. I understand it wasn't just the Cowboys who defeated the Eagles. He laughed at Dad because he had sex with his wife. This is enough to drive a regular person insane. But Jim knows nothing about Frank or myself, so he couldn't tell Frank was hinting. Helen disagreed. He knew for certain that Frank was acting like a complete imbecile, so he put him in his place. When you visit someone's residence, you should not mock or disrespect him. Any man would be enraged, even if he had no idea that his wife was this guy's mistress. Helen yelled, I'm not going to listen to that kind of talk anymore. You live under my roof, and you will treat me with the respect I deserve, whether you believe I deserve it or not. On Wednesday evening, Jim was relaxing by the pool when his phone rang. He looked at it, recognized Helen, and left it on voicemail. He returned a few minutes later to check the message. Jim, I know you are checking on my calls. Please call me back. We need to make some decisions about the house. Who will shovel the driveway when it snows? Is it worthwhile to sign an agreement for the delivery of fuel oil? Which company will we use? Please give me a call. Jim intently listened to the message. He didn't see any animosity, so he decided to contact Helen back. She had several crucial inquiries. He did not want him or Emily to have any safety or health concerns. Thank you for your call, Jim, Helen replied calmly. I'm concerned about the things you usually do around the house now that the snow has arrived. Could you tell me what I should do? I will sit down, prepare a complete list, and submit it to you via email. Jim pledged. I should have thought about it. Helen asked if you were going home for Christmas. Mom and Dad asked us over for Christmas dinner. Your folks would like to see us on Christmas Eve. They are continually asking whether I can talk to you. It's awkward to tell them no. They claim you don't return their calls either. I do not know what my schedule will be. If at all possible, I'll be home. That is something you can tell them. You can also explain that I will begin answering their calls after they begin to speak with me politely. Every communication I get, even from my mother, is threatening and nasty. This is not something I need. Jim was insistent. Okay, let me tell them. However, I doubt it will be of much benefit. They weren't pleased with how you treated Frank or how you disappeared afterward. Helen answered cautiously. So there's no need for me to visit for Christmas, is there? I will not let your parents or even my parents treat me as the public enemy number one. If they want me there because they like my company, that's one thing. I'm not interested in showing up just to hear how horrible I am. Jim said, You can still go home. Helen sobbed, surprising Jim. Emily and I will be delighted to see you and will refrain from making dumb comments, if we can prevent it. Do you miss making love to me? So here it is. Jim didn't want to have sex with Helen. Hearing her and Frank together very much ended those feelings. He considered how to effectively answer. He might have made things up because he hasn't slept with Helen since learning about Frank. I've always liked making love. Jim said that every time we made love, it was something wonderful for me, but he omitted to clarify that it was only because he didn't realize he was receiving Frank's sloppy seconds. Yes, I agree. Helen wept again. You are the best lover in the world, and I miss having you in my bed. Please return home for Christmas. Let's see if you can join us for Christmas week. I must take care of this. They rarely give folks that week off on the spur of the moment because so many people inquire about when they can fit into their vacation itinerary. I'll let you know, Jim vowed. I will send you an email with a list of everyone you need to contact to prepare for the winter season. Helen smiled when she hung up. Is he the world's best lover? Emily recited. It would be best if Frank didn't hear this. He appears to assume he's at the top of your list. This is his wife's list. And who knows who else's list? I requested that you use restraint when discussing Frank. Your father actually outperforms Frank, so that was not a lie. Frank is more entertaining but not superior. When you explain it to him in this manner, I'm confident he'll hold on to this small piece of good news. He will be as pleased as a peacock. His wife claims he is superior to her other boyfriends. This is the type of recommendation a husband can be proud of. Emily noticed her mother leaving the room in tears. Jim thoroughly appreciated his new life. He made it a habit to swim every day. Every day he became more tanned and comfortable. He had a good understanding of the plant's equipment and was confident that he could keep things running well. The only thing that astonished him was the number of widows, divorcees, and single ladies who lived in his condominium. Everyone, without exception, seems to relish his presence. Once it was discovered that he could use tools. He was always in demand. This didn't bother him because the ladies always baked something for him to take home, prepared a meal for him, or left a bottle of wine or 6 packs of beer at his door. Helen was urging him to travel home for the holidays just a few days before Christmas. Jim had just finished mending Mrs. Struthers' closet door when he turned around to see her naked near the bed. "Jim, I would want to thank you for your kindness." The widow, who was middle-aged, smiled. "I don't have much extra money, but I do have a lot of unfulfilled ambitions and demands. Will you commit to making love to me?" Jim couldn't make up his mind. He'd never cheated on his wife. In fact, he only had sex with one lady in his entire life. Susan Struthers had huge, perky breasts and beautiful legs that went up. She was a highly desirable woman, and not just because of her age. "Susan, I need to figure something out in my marriage. I'll have a better notion of where I will be after Christmas. Never have I cheated on my wife. But she might no longer be my wife. In any event, I'll either ask you if the proposal is still valid after the holiday, or I'll reconcile with my wife. I must acknowledge that the odds of reconciliation are limited right now." "I understand," the widow said, slinging her robe over her shoulders. "That stupid bitch didn't realize what a diamond she was and cheated on you, didn't she? I'll be here, and the offer will be available after the holidays. You know, I'm not the only lady here with unmet needs, right? All of the girls like you. You are always a gentleman, always courteous and helpful, and we're all aware that we can trust you. If you decide to end the marriage, there will be plenty of ladies eager to console," Susan Struther prophesied. Jim called Helen to say he'd attempt to be home on Christmas Eve. He was astounded by how happy she appeared. He knew he missed Helen and Emily, and he owed it to both them and himself to find a solution. With this in mind, he set out northward, 3 days till Christmas. On the first day, he drove halfway. So he had time to shop on the second day and would still arrive home in the evening before Christmas Eve. He even agreed to pay a visit to his parents for Christmas Eve dinner. If they became too dissatisfied, he would simply depart. It was 9 a.m. when he pulled out into his street and noticed a large number of cars parked in his driveway. Jim recognized a few of them. Helen was organizing her customary informal holiday dinner for her pals at Home Depot. As he neared the front door, he could see into the kitchen, where big as life was fucking jerk Frank, who didn't want to have anything to do with him and ruin the festive spirit. Jim moved around the rear of the home, opening the basement entrance. He could stay there till the party ended and Frank went. He was dozing on an old sofa he had stolen several years prior. He awoke about 2 hours after falling asleep. He listened, but couldn't hear the sounds coming from above. He returned to the yard and had a look around. There was just one odd machine remained. Jim returned to the front door, curious who it belonged to. He looked into the kitchen again, but Helen was already with Frank. He kissed her and massaged her left breast. Jim felt his old wrath return. He restrained himself from storming in and attacking Frank. He got away with it once, but he is unlikely to do so again. He decided to sneak upstairs and catch the two lovers in action. Then he'll take a couple shots with his phone and tell her to go to hell before returning to Florida. It appeared to be a solid strategy, but it did not work out. Jim entered the house and climbed the stairs undetected. He snuck into the guest room and waited. I'm turning out the lights and opening the door gently. Helen walked upstairs and into the master bedroom about 20 minutes later. Jim became alarmed when he heard the shower turn on. The bitch planned to shower and get ready for her lover. Jim realized this as Frank was still walking downstairs. He stepped out into the hallway and turned off the bedside lamp before returning to the guest room. When Frank was about a third of the way up, Jim reached out and turned off the light in the hallway. He knew from experience that the second floor would be very dark, but in the dim light from the street, he could see the silhouette of anyone coming up the stairs. Frank muttered something when the lights turned off, but I continued up the stairs. Jim stepped out of the bedroom and stood at the top of the stairs watching Frank approach. Jim kicked Frank with his right foot when he only had 3 steps left. He felt his heel against Frank's jaw. Jim was taken aback by the man's sudden return. In the dim light, he could see Frank sliding down the stairs in a straight line, like a bobsledder. He landed on the bottom step of the stairs and fell into the center of the living room due to inertia. He did not move once he arrived. Jim could hear the water running in the shower and knew Helen didn't hear the sounds the man made as he jumped upside down. Jim reflected again as his rage subsided. If Frank dies, he'll be in big trouble. Jim dashed down the stairs, stepped over Frank's prone body, and left the house. He was already 100 miles away after 2 hours and decided to go a long way further before stopping. It was almost dawn when he pulled into a cheap motel and paid in cash for his room. He rested for 4 hours before continuing his journey south. He reflected on the situation while driving the car. He assaulted a man. This could be a very serious situation depending on whether Frank survives. How did this happen? Jim realized he had to stay away from Frank and Helen or he'd end up in prison for murder. They were simply not worth it. He also admitted to himself that being without Helen made him feel lonely and lost. Until recently, he and Emily had been at the center of his world. They betrayed him, so he needed to move on. At noon, his phone rang. It was his parents' phone number, so he went to voicemail. He lacked the courage to explain to his mother why he didn't come to dinner on Christmas Eve or why he attacked Frank again. Half an hour later, he mustered the courage to listen to the message. "Hello, Jim. This is your father. Call us when you receive it. Everything has gone wrong in your house. Helen and Emily are fine, but something important has happened that you should be aware of. Welcome, Father. I have just received your message." "What's happened?" Jim asked when his father picked up the phone. "There's easy way to tell you this, son. That damn Frank was at your house again last night. It was already late. He fell down the stairs and was seriously hurt. He suffered a broken jaw, a broken arm, several broken ribs, and another concussion. His wife was furious when she found out that you had him. She got the impression that he was working late at Home Depot on year-end inventory. She got to your house before the paramedics loaded him into the ambulance. She probably slapped Helen and called her every name in the book. She even tried to throw her husband off the gurney but was stopped by the police. To say she was upset would be an understatement. This all takes us back to Thanksgiving when you threw that idiot out. We were upset about the apparent brutal attack on a guy simply because he was wearing a cowboy shirt. Now that we have a little clearer picture of what's going on, your mother and I want to apologize to you. We should have known you wouldn't do something like that without a good reason. We are proud of you, son. You showed more restraint than I did." "Thank you, Dad. How's Emily? Was she at home all this time?" I asked Jim. "This is another problem, Dad. I had a pretty serious conversation this morning. Yesterday, she spent the night with a friend, but today she admitted that she knew Helen was spreading her legs for this idiot in her defense. Emily said she wanted the family to stay together until she finished school. After that, she was going to tell you. Needless to say, we were very disappointed, and I can't imagine how you feel. Your mother told her that she betrayed you just like Helen. There were a lot of tears, but at the end, we all hugged. Thank you for your support and for helping Emily figure it out." Jim replied, "Son, where are you really? I know you said you were transferred, but now that I know what the problems were, I wonder if you just moved to a motel or got a room here in town. No matter how angry you are, moving to Michigan in December is pretty drastic. The company bought a smaller house in Daytona Beach. I was promoted and transferred here. They gave me a big raise and a small apartment. I'm the maintenance supervisor," Jim boasted to his father in Florida. "Not a damn thing. This is cool. Would you mind if your mom and I visit you in February? By then, we'll have had enough of winter." "Any time, Dad. You're welcome. Please don't tell Helen where I am. I don't want to explain anything to her now." "I hear you, Jim. It is unlikely that we will talk to her about anything. I would advise you to talk to Emily. She's feeling pretty depressed about all this chaos. She thinks you must have known Helen was cheating because you were so cold to both of them. Did you know Emily knew about this? I need to go, Dad. We'll discuss all this later when the dust settles. Thanks for your understanding and help, Emily. I love you both," Jim said, ending the conversation. He returned to his apartment at dusk on Christmas Eve. It was Jim's first Christmas alone, and he felt depressed. He turned on the TV, opened the beer, and sat on the couch to vegetate. He was still thinking when the doorbell rang. "I saw that your light was on, and I came to wish you a Merry Christmas," greeted Susan Struthers. "It's not good to be alone at Christmas for both of us. The fact that you came back tells me that you have not made peace with your wife." "It's a reasonable assumption." Jim agreed her boyfriend was going to sleep in my bed. "I hate crowds. Unless, of course, it's a couple of women. What about one woman?" "I may make you move a little, but I don't think you'll mind," Susan added pointedly. Jim considered her offer for a moment before accepting. "I would really like that. I must warn you that I haven't had sex for a long time, and I must not be very good at it. Otherwise, my wife wouldn't go looking for happiness on the side. I really doubt you are the problem. When a man is as gracious, selfless, and kind as you are in everyday life, you can bet he'll be great in the bedroom." Susan replied, "Do you have condoms?" "No, I haven't used them in 20 years, Jim replied, realizing that he still had a lot to learn about dating. "Your partners will appreciate that you have them. It's a healthy, mindful thing." "It is true," I asked Susan. So it was, and Jim had a great Christmas Eve. His anger towards Helen and Emily began to fade as he replaced it with happy memories that improved his self-esteem. He still felt the pain as well as the void their actions had created in his life, but he had finally gotten over it. People did bad things, even good people, and even people he loved. Susan helped make sure that life was truly worth living. She snuck out of his house while it was still dark on Christmas morning to avoid gossip at the condominium, but agreed to meet at the heated pool later on Christmas Day. That evening, Jim enjoyed a home-cooked meal and another round of lovemaking with Susan. He returned to his room at 9 o'clock in the evening again to avoid gossip. There was no doubt that several eyes had seen him enter and leave Susan's apartment. Jim's phone rang a few minutes after he got home. "Dad, you didn't come home for Christmas. But I don't blame you. Mom is a mess, and I feel like crap too. I'm so sorry for what we did to you. I knew it was wrong, but I was selfish. I wanted you to stay together until I finished school. It's all water under the bridge," Jim answered. "I won't lie. You both caused me a lot of pain. I had no idea that your mother was so unhappy with me. It never occurred to me that you would agree and even help her hide this from me. I'm trying to get through this, but it's not easy. This is the strangest thing. Mom is not unhappy with you. She told me that you are a good husband, father, and lover. She just wanted to try something different. And now she fucking regrets the idea. Did you know about Frank and Mom on Thanksgiving when Mom invited him over?" "Yes. I should have apologized for losing control, but the damn guy rubbed his nose in my face. I just snapped at the level of disrespect he and your mother showed me. I understand everything clearly. I was glad you decorated it." I saw his stupid grin and realized that he was gloating. "Mom insisted it was because of the cowboy shirt. But it had never bothered you before. Did you miss my last 2 matches because you were upset with me?" "Yes, I'm really sorry, but when Frank said he'd be cheering for you, I knew I couldn't go otherwise I'd be in jail right now," Jim said. "Did you hear Frank? Were you there when I brought the spare tire? You cut the valve stem, didn't you? You wanted to know if your mom would call you for help to get her to confess. Instead, I found myself in the thick of things. I'm so sorry, Dad. I really was selfish and stupid. And now I'm paying for it. Don't blame yourself for this. I should have just met your mother on the spot. But I discovered that I have anger issues. I would probably send them both to the hospital." "I doubt it, Dad," Emily replied. "You're just not the type to hurt a woman, especially your wife. Frank is a completely different story. Grandpa told you that Frank fell down our stairs last night. He is pretty damaged, but is expected to make a full recovery, although it will take some time. Guess what? I found in the basement, it was the new laptop. You must have left me for Thanksgiving. This was planned ahead. Thanks very much. I'll use it a lot, especially when I go to college next year," Emily promised. "I'm glad you liked it," Jim replied, realizing that he had forgotten about the gifts that he had put on the sofa in the basement. "Did you also find one for your mother? She cried like a child when she saw the pearls. It was a nice gift, and it really made her feel even worse about the way she treated you. Funny thing is, I didn't see these gifts until a few days before Christmas when I was in the basement looking for new Christmas tree lights. Thank you for being such a good father for so many years. I'm just beginning to appreciate you." "As I should," Emily admitted with a slight sob. "Don't be upset. When I was your age, I thought my parents were dumber than a box of rocks. They really learned a lot over the next few years. Jim chuckled. I just want you to be happy and have a wonderful life. Do not worry about me. I'll be okay. I love you, Dad. Maybe I'll even find a way to get to Michigan to visit you this winter. Emily made a suggestion. I didn't tell the whole truth about my transfer. The company bought a small house in Daytona Beach. This is where I live now. If you want to visit me, I have a spare bedroom. There's a pool right outside my door, and the ocean is a couple blocks away. Are you joking me? If my mother and I knew about this, we would go with you. I guess you didn't really want us, did you? We didn't deserve to be with you after all the pain we caused. I don't blame you for not telling us. We lied to you every day. So you had the right not to tell the whole truth, at least once. This will really push Mom over the edge. You don't have to tell her anything, although it's no longer a secret. I'll email her my address so we can negotiate the divorce by mail, and I won't have to go back there. Jim reasoned, I was afraid to ask about this. Are you going to divorce your mom? I get everything, and don't blame you at all. I warned her when she dated that clown, but she believed you'd never know. I just wish things had turned out differently. Good night, Dad. I'll probably try to come visit. Cool. Good night and Merry Christmas. Emily had just put her phone back in her pocket when her mother came in the room. Did I understand correctly that your father is not actually in Michigan? Then where is he? And why did he lie to us? He's at his company's newly acquired plant in Daytona Beach, Emily replied. He didn't lie to us. He said that he was being transferred to another plant, and so it was. We didn't know they had one in Dayton, so we assumed it was in Michigan. He didn't tell us because he was there. When you called me to bring the spare tire to the motel, he heard the entire conversation and knew who you were in the cheap room with. He didn't feel obligated to take us into account. Why didn't he say anything then? Was he afraid of Frank? Helen inquired. Afraid of Frank? What the hell is wrong with you? Emily inquired. He wiped the floor with Frank's ass. Frank is no match for his father, either in a fight or in raising a family. You are always trying to find flaws or weaknesses in him in order to justify the unforgivable. I would strongly advise you not to treat your next husband the same way you treat your father. Next husband? What did your father tell you? Asked the alarmed Helen. It's hard to believe, but he's had enough of your deception and lies. He feels that divorce is the next step. I told you he'll do it when he finds out. I don't want a divorce. I don't like Frank. I don't even like him. None of this would have happened if he hadn't fallen down the stairs. Helen whined. Didn't you listen? You were doomed the day I delivered your spare tire to the motel. Dad was there, saw and heard everything. He knows how much we disrespected him. He knows you lied. He knows you cheated. And he knew it when he hit Frank on Thanksgiving. By that time, you were already a divorced walking woman. Frank is not to blame for anything. He is yours. He made the porridge himself. Maybe now that his wife is divorcing him, you two can be together. Emily made a suggestion. I don't need this donkey. I want Jim to come back, Helen sobbed. The next day was even worse for Helen. Emily called her father to explain the new problem. Mom received a letter from the state health department. Her boyfriend took a blood test while he was in the hospital, and he has a sexually transmitted disease. Mom must get tested and also tell them about everyone she has had sex with. You're on her list. Although I'm not sure how far down you are, you will receive a letter very soon. Wow, I probably should have seen this coming. I'll make an appointment today. Thank you for letting me know right away. I appreciate the care and attention. This is the kind of treatment a man should expect from his daughter. I got lost for a while, but now I'm back on the right track. Take care of yourself, Dad. Jim arranged for an immediate examination. He had to give Susan credit for being smart enough to prevent the spread of any STD. Helen might have passed on to him on his way home from work, bought a bunch of different types of condoms. When he got home, he took out a large bowl and almost filled it with condoms. He placed the bowl on the bedside table. He promised himself that he would never cause any sweet lady to contract a disgusting disease that was so easily preventable. As time went by, Jim received the results of his blood test and was pleased to learn that he was not sick. Jim's free time was filled with requests from the condominium women to do housework. He became more and more in demand. One evening, when he mentioned this to Susan, she admitted that she had mentioned to two girls that he was very capable in bed. They were sworn to secrecy, but she admitted they may have let it slip. In the company of women, most of whom were unmarried, for whatever reason, the ladies liked him. Jim found himself regularly stopping by the drugstore to refill his condom bowl. Without exception, all the ladies who entered his bedroom rummaged through the basin, looking at the condoms before choosing one or two. They all seemed pleased that he was so concerned about his and their health. It just added to his legend. One afternoon, shortly before Easter, Jim opened the door and saw Emily with a small suitcase. Before he could speak, she threw herself into his arms and hugged him tightly. "I'm so sorry, Dad. Please forgive me and let me stay with you for a few days. But I will leave if you want. I'm just surprised to see you at my door. Come on, I'll show you the room," Jim suggested. "You're always welcome here. You look quite grown up." "I told you, I finally filled in the right spots." Emily laughed, turning around so Jim could admire her from all angles. "I wear the same bra size as my mother, although now it probably fits me better. Mom is getting pretty thin. I hitched a ride with the Shears. They're headed to Orlando, but they were kind enough to drop me off here." Emily spoke. "I guess I knew that you would let me stay. It's spring break, and I'll only stay here for 4 days before they pull me back into the snow and cold. This place is pretty good. I guess you like living here. It's not as big as our house, but it has everything I need, including a heated pool right outside the door," Jim agreed, watching Emily look about the place. "Wow, looks like you're receiving everything you need." Emily laughed when she saw a dish of condoms in his bedroom. "Well done, Dad. You deserve a little joy after everything that's happened. I will not annoy you. I'll just sit by the pool and soak up the sun while you're at work." "What is that? Orange ball in the sky." "I seem to remember seeing him at some point. Like the 4th of July 2 years ago tomorrow evening when I returned from work, we shall go to supper. There are a number of wonderful places to dine here, especially if you enjoy beer and ribs or steak or seafood." Jim said, "I'll take you to one of the locations where the guys from work hang out so they can see how gorgeous my daughter is." The next evening, Jim and Emily sat at the rib joint and had a good time. "Why did you forgive me, Dad? I don't know if I would do this if I were you. It was a terrible mistake on my part to assist your mother in her infidelity. I resent myself for doing this, and I sincerely apologize. I will give a brief response." Jim responded, "I'm much happier with you than when you weren't there. In this regard, I am selfish. It makes me happier and has now become one of my life goals. I'm delighted that you think so. I hope you're always glad I'm around," Emily stated sincerely. "We were always close, and I hated myself when I realized I had pushed you away. Is there any chance you will ever forgive your mother? She's not doing well without you. She has lost weight and rarely goes out. When rumors spread that Frank had a sexually transmitted disease and that his sexual partners needed to be tested, half of the store employees were terrified. Frank appears to have contracted a sexually transmitted disease from a newly hired cashier. They infected a significant number of people. Mom was the only manager on the list, which was awkward for her. Emily recalled several occasions when she returned home in tears. To her credit, she persevered and eventually accepted that she had made a serious mistake when she cheated on you. "Emily, your mother and I agreed to be partners. Partners should be honest with one another. They have to trust each other." Jim admitted, "I don't trust her anymore." "I believe so, especially now that I met your harem at the pool today. It was awkward having so many women question me about you. Based on how they spoke about you, I knew at least 4 of them were sleeping with you. My father owns a condominium." Emily smirked. "Seriously? They all think you're a sensitive, honest, attractive man who is pretty good in bed." "I'm not sure about this. I have a few friends who visit from time to time. I don't believe they regard me as particularly noteworthy. It is more like I am free," Jim offered modestly. "Mom made a serious mistake," Emily spoke. "Can I come as soon as I finish school and look for a summer job here? I'm considering attending college here if it's close by. Can I stay with you? Can I spend weekends and holidays with you if it is too far away to commute to work? My mother and I don't get along well. We're no longer close." Her deception disturbed me far more than I realized at the time. Jim eagerly agreed to Emily's request. He felt much happier when he spent time with his only child. He enjoyed watching her grow into a woman. He spoke with her several times a week when she returned from spring break. She insisted he not attend her graduation, but he promised to go to Florida the next day. On Sunday afternoon, Jim opened the door to greet Emily. When he met Helen in person, he was unable to think or move for what seemed like minutes. but he knew it was only 10 or 15 seconds. He was able to regain some composure. "Come on in, Helen. Can I get you a drink?" Jim inquired automatically, attempting to understand why she was at his door. "Many thanks, Jim." "That would be fantastic," Helen said. Jim followed them into the kitchen, poured them both some iced tea, and sat down while Helen took her seat on the other side of the table. "I was planning to pick up Emily. She informed me that she will be living here with you. I changed jobs and relocated to Dayton. We need to decide what to do with the house." Helen concluded, "You've never filed for divorce and we've never spoken, so I'm not sure what you want to do. What motivates your decision to relocate here?" Jim wasn't expecting this. "So what do you think will happen?" Helen joked. "I think I will stop freezing every winter. Emily attends college in Florida, so I have nothing to do there other than gossip. I'm not sure what Emily told you, but your parents don't talk to me, and mine aren't any better. I have disappointed a lot of people, including myself, but mainly you." Helen admitted, "I can't ask for forgiveness because my actions were unforgivable. I'm looking for a fresh start where people won't make fun of me for having a pop and stuff like that. By the way, I'm glad I didn't pass this on to you. I believe you had stopped having sex with me by the time Frank gave me that gift. I am responsible for what occurred to us. I tried to place the blame on you. Then there's Frank, the girl who infected him, even the man who created the letter. Frank went down. I realized it was all on me. I ruined my life and attempted to ruin yours. If you hadn't found out, you would have appreciated Frank's small gift for me. I have come to regret what I did. I'm not sure how I thought it seemed normal at the time, as if I was entitled to a little fling. I even brought Emily into this, and I'll never forgive myself for it. I almost ruined her relationship with her father because I was a selfish brat. I kept telling myself that Frank was an ass and that this was going to end badly." Helen admitted, "But I didn't listen. I'm so glad you welcomed her back into your life. Your love and approval are extremely important to her. This meant a lot to me before I lost my way. Now that I don't have it, I'd do anything to get it back. I believe we should make a list of things to sell and split the proceeds. I thought you had filed for divorce. Isn't Frank currently single?" Jim posed a pointed question. "I heard that's true, but I don't give a damn about that jerk, if that's what you mean. I'm a stupid bitch, but not enough to get Frank to divorce me," Helen replied. "I thought you had divorced me already. I have given you several reasons." Jim said, "I think I'm happy with what I'm doing here. You know how much I despise change, and divorce can be particularly disruptive. We should talk about this now, don't we?" "I suppose so. If you prefer, I would like to remain married. However, my previous actions contradict this assertion. I know you're too good a man to stay with a lying, cheating wife. I had known it all along. But I reminded myself, you'll never know." "Where are you going to stay today?" I asked Jim. "We've got some time. We can talk about the house sale and everything else we have going on in the next week or two. I'm going to look for a motel when I leave here. I noticed something close to Highway 95 there. It's relatively close to Home Depot. Helen said she would start working there in a week. Emily went grocery shopping to give us some time to talk, but she'll be back soon, and I need to leave. Emily's room includes 2 single beds. Jim suggested you stay there if she doesn't mind. Will this not make you uncomfortable?" Helen acknowledged that I am not her favorite person right now, deservedly. "I will be fine if Emily does not mind. We'll ask her when she arrives," Jim replied. Emily didn't mind sharing a room with her mother for a while. Over the next few days, the three began to revert to the habits they had shared for years. Jim stayed away from the pool and the other ladies while Helen was living with him. He did not want to hurt her. Several women come to the pool and ask when I'll be leaving. Helen started one evening after Emily left for a concert. They always talk about your large bowl of condoms and which ones they prefer. It's quite amusing when you think about it. They did everything but tell me that I ruined their sex life. Have you made 4 women happy, Jim? I am very impressed. It's a shame I didn't leave an impression on you before meeting Frank." Jim lost his cool. "I will not apologize for pleasing these women. None of them are married, and they are aware that I do not make any commitments. I try to give them as much pleasure as possible, and they enjoy it." "How about some fun with me?" Helen inquired. "My offer is unconditional. I just feel like I owe you a lot for taking such good care of me after what I did to you." Jim insisted that I wasn't the same guy he remembered. "I tend to be more demanding and assertive. I tell these women what I want and they appear to enjoy it. I never let them stay longer than one night at a time. So stay with me for one night. I am capable of handling anything you may propose. I will feel better for what I did, and I will do everything possible to make you feel even better." Helen made a vow. Jim reflected on her words for a few minutes before making a decision. 10 minutes later, they were naked on his bed. "My God." Helen exhaled, hoping to catch our breath. "That was incredible. You have learned a few new tricks. Many thanks, Jim." Helen was moving her clothes from Jim's room to Emily's when she heard Emily's voice. "You guys have made enough noise. I'm glad you are finished so I can get some sleep." Helen stayed with Emily and Jim during the summer. She slept on Emily's second bed and paid frequent visits to Jim. She frequently told Jim that he was the only man she would ever have. Jim simply nodded his agreement. After the first night, Jim noticed Helen frequently counting the condoms in the bowl. He realized she was trying to give him everything she had, preventing him from serving the other ladies in the building. Helen disliked the fact that her shift ended at 10 p.m. and Jim came home at 5 at least twice a week. She would come home to find fresh sheets on his bed and a couple of condoms, as she had to leave for work at 2 p.m. She spent the majority of her mornings by the pool. The other ladies were not mean to her. It was clear that they were all aware that her marriage was on the verge of collapse and that she was the one who had caused the damage by cheating. Helen knew that when one of the ladies made a remark or asked a question, it would be her cue. Helen. "Have you chosen new blue bedding for Jim's room?" I inquired with Susan Struthers one morning. "It coordinates well with curtains and carpet." "Of course, yes, Monica Barron. It's a gorgeous masculine color, and Jim is a very masculine man. Jim, you don't want these women in your bed," Helen complained that night. "I will give you as much sex as you desire. Isn't I enough for you?" "Exactly," Jim responded. "I will never associate with any of these women again." "But why are there 2 fewer condoms? The bowl today? How does everyone know the color of your bedding?" Helen inquired. "I honestly have no idea." Jim smiled as he answered. "Thank you for taking the time to hear today's story. If you enjoyed this article, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a story to tell about your or someone else's situation, please do not hesitate to contact me. Please take care.